I will be taking a look at different Senate models, including the EPA model, and looking at what I believe to be the most accurate Senate forecast. And we'll be exploring five forecasts, 538 Real Clear Politics, Race to the White House, and Cook Political Report, as well as my own Senate forecast. And of course, I will not rate, but whatever, we're gonna get into our first Senate forecast. The first Senate forecast is the 538 Senate forecast, probably the most famous out of all of these forecasts. And looking at this, they say that the Democrats are slightly favored to win the Senate, with Republicans at 36% and Democrats at 64%. Personally, I'm just going to look at this model first. As you can see right now, it looks like that the most likely scenario is that Democrats get 50 seats, and the average is that Democrats at 50.4 seats. So, as you can see, 538 thinks that Democrats will get probably 50 or 51 seats. I personally see this model as really the model is focused on polls, which I won't necessarily say I agree or disagree with, but that definitely does screw the model to a Democratic bias. We can look at some of these random states here. For example, the state of Arizona. Currently, they have this race as a likely Democratic state, which I don't believe is really the case. Just looking at the recent polls in the state of Arizona has actually tightened. However, the polling difference, the the forecast difference rather in the state has actually widened. So I don't think that makes much sense. In fact, Democrats were only at about a 60% chance in July 8th, when they had about a 8% lead in the polls, and now they have about a 4% lead, and yet their chances are at 79% to the Republicans' 21%. So that will be that. I personally don't like this model that much. It is a very interactive model. It's very interesting to look at, but I just don't think that this is that accurate. So out of a rating of 10 stars, I'm going to give it a 5. Now I'm going to go to a Real Clear Politics model, which has the Democrats at 48 to the Republicans 52. Now, no spoilers here, but this model looks quite similar to the EPAA forecasting model, which has a similar margins here. You can see that for all the states here, Republicans will flip two states, Nevada and Georgia, while retaining all of their own seats, and Democrats retain all of them, except Nevada and Georgia, of course. Now, just looking at this is basically all based on the polls, except they adjust the polls pretty significantly. They look at which states polls typically overestimate or underestimate candidates in, and just basically, according to those results, adjust the posters. I'm going to take one example, for instance, the state of Pennsylvania. The polls currently show Fetterman up by 3.4% against Mehmet Oz. However, in the last three elections, 2020, 2018, and 2016, polls typically underestimated the GOP by a margin of exactly 5.5 points. Subtracting 3.4 points by 5.5 points gives a negative 2.1 points. Thus, Oz would win by 2.1 points according to the Senate forecast. I think that this forecast, it doesn't necessarily include opinion. It just includes basically the polls, which is not something I like, but generally I think the forecast is probably the most accurate out of the four we're going to be rating, so I'm going to give this forecast a 8 star out of a 10. The next model here we're going to be taking a look at is Race to the White House, which currently gives the Democrats about 50.8 seats. This is pretty high compared to all the other forecasts. Real Clear Politics has it at 52.48 Republican. The 538 model has it at 50.4 seats for Democrats. Race to the White House has it at 50.8, and as you can see, there is a significant Democratic trend. Now, I don't think that is actually the case. I don't think Joe Biden is actually, making that much progress. I don't think it makes sense that Republicans were at 51, and now Democrats are at close to 51. Now, obviously, this is their opinion, which I do respect, but I just don't think it makes that much sense. And look at the general trend here. Democrats were leading a pretty substantial margin up until one day around the around I think November of 2021, which is when Biden's approval rating really dropped a lot and Republicans really went up. But now Democrats are at one of their highest points since Biden took office, which doesn't make sense. All right, Biden was up by 20% when he took office in January of 2020. Now apparently he is actually higher than he was when he took office, despite being down by 8% in the polls. In his favorability polls, I just don't think that makes sense. So I have to take that into consideration. And looking at the map here, I have some questions here. So Utah is a projected 9.5%. So McConnell, according to this forecast, has a 20% chance of winning Utah. For contrast here, Donald Bullock, the Republican candidate in New Hampshire, only has a 13% chance. I don't think that is very accurate there, so that is definitely one thing I don't really like. Another thing I don't really like, Ohio. Apparently Vance is only up by 2.4%. Looking at Georgia, Arizona, or Pennsylvania, all of those three states have basically double the margin for the Democrats. Again, it does not make sense. And just looking at this model, I'm not very happy about it, so I'm only going to give it a 3 out of 10 based on basically the individual state ratings, and most importantly, just looking at this trend graph, I don't think makes any sense whatsoever, because at the start of 2022, we were looking at the Democrats potentially getting 52 Senate seats, the start of 2021, that is. Now we're talking about the Republicans probably getting 52, 53 seats. So this forecast, in my opinion, just does not make sense. The final forecast is the Cook Political Report, which basically rates all of the races here. Basically, I didn't actually do the math, but it seems like they support something along the lines of a 50-50 Senate. One thing I don't really like about this forecast is that it doesn't really describe much why. You can click on the individual Senate ones to be fair, but you have to log in, which is not very cool. Just looking at this, I'd say that the forecast really isn't that great. Some of the ratings make sense, some of them really don't. I don't think that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania should have the same rating. And I think that Colorado and Arizona, for instance, shouldn't be both in the lead and D column. I think Colorado should be closer to likely D, while Arizona definitely should be closer to toss-up. And on the Republican side, I don't really think that Ron Johnson is in the toss-up category. I don't think that makes any sense. I don't think Mike Lee is going to lose re-election. So I'm only going to give this a 5 out of 10. And finally to my own forecast, which obviously I'm not going to rate because I'm very biased in terms of my own Senate prediction. But this is my forecast here, 51 for Republicans, 47 for Democrats. Both of these toss-up races I do currently consider in the Republican column, so it should be 53-47, but this is my standard forecasting model. Anyhow, thanks for watching, have a nice day. Bye!